since dreams are soul travel, it's a departure from the physical form, which is basically what death is. The difference with dreams is that you return back to your physical form. So there is still a certain amount of tethering there that, you don't lose. But when death occurs, you completely separate from the physical form. So it's very similar and very close in a lot of ways. And I think if people realized that, they might not be so afraid of death.
Happy Hallow Dream, everyone, and thank you for joining me this month for Halloween-themed dream-related content straight from the realms of the spooky, creepy, strange, and mysterious. Today's very special guest is Bethany Bleile. Bethany is a death doula and an avid dreamer who uses dream techniques and practices to assist those who are dying to have a good experience in death and what lies beyond. Her connection to dreams, poetry, and trees began at a young age and inspired her to view service and support as an art that she pursues with great passion. She uses her experience in practices like yoga, meditation, Reiki, dreaming, ceremony, and psychopomp to inform her work to help co-create an experience that is unique and meaningful to everyone involved. So welcome, Bethany. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for being here for the very first Hollow Dream season for the Dreamwork Coach channel. We kind of dreamed up this idea together, so I'm very happy that you will be my first Halloween special guest.
I'm so honored.
So excited to have all the fun backgrounds and stuff too. Let's get started. Some people may not know what a death doula is, and to be honest, I didn't know until recently. So if you could maybe share with us, what is a death doula and how did you get into this type of work?
So a death doula is also known as a thanadoula, which comes from the Greek word thanatos, meaning death, and doula, which just means servant. So people are familiar typically with doulas being associated to birth. And there was a man, Henry Frisco Weiss, who was studying midwifery and started thinking that this would actually really benefit, this model would benefit people who are dying. So he approached his instructor, they kind of worked out some ideas, and he started training people as death doulas. That's basically how kind of the more modern approach has been framed. But supporting people through death has been happening throughout the centuries. It's not new, but it's something that we in a more modern and Western society have lost connection with. So a death doula is there to serve and support people who are dying, as well as the loved ones, the family members, friends. And that's what our role is, and that can encompass any number of things. But we're trying to bring back this support around death to overcome the fear of death.
So how did you get involved in doing work like this?
I had a sense that something was out there, that I needed to be doing something, and I wasn't entirely clear what it was. And there was a whole series of things that started happening. I had a conversation with a mutual friend that I knew, like through a friend. I had no intention of going through the things that I was experiencing that felt like I was being called to something. But with her, I ended up just telling her everything. She was the one who said that it sounded like this article she had just read about death doulas, and had I ever heard of them? She sent me the article. I'd never heard the term before, didn't know anything about it. Later that week, I went to a workshop and I was able to reconnect with a woman I knew from a previous one. And she said, I just set up this course. I just got involved in this course and I'm so excited. And, it ended up being down the street from me. They were just taking applicants, and I signed up. Within a week of reading the article about death doulas, I was signed up for a program. And that was how I knew that this was meant to be.
Yeah.
That's how I ended up getting involved, and then studied and have been volunteering and doing things since.
That's extremely synchronistic. It seems like the universe has a way of pointing us in the right direction and then just making it happen quickly, once you get on that path. So
Definitely.
I'm happy you found that path. It sounds like very important work. And like you said, we don't, like in the West, that got lost. I wonder if it has something to do with like people living longer or something, who knows, but.
I think it generally started with funeral homes. As people started taking the services out of the home, where, visitations used to occur, and in some areas still do, visitations would occur in the home. People would be burying their own loved ones, often on their own property. And that all started changing as funeral homes started cropping up, and people started doing more and more services in a funeral home versus people in their own families handling and dealing with the remains of someone after they passed. So we started becoming disconnected as that took hold. And a lot of people don't realize, they think that it's illegal for us to care for our own dead, right? That you can't keep a body in the house. You can't do, they think that that's not legal, but it really is. It still is a problem. You just have to fill out the appropriate paperwork. You have to know, what steps you have to take, but you don't need a funeral home. And that's where a death doula is also really helpful, because we can point you in those directions. We can help you find the right kind of paperwork, give you the ideas that you need to make sure that you do what it is you want. Mm-hmm. That's where it all kind of started to separate. And now we're trying to bring that back so that people are both informed and empowered to have the kind of experience for themselves when they're dying, but also for their loved ones, to then be able to do what has the most meaning, whether that's partially in a funeral home or completely from home. Help them do that.
I find this so fascinating. Just that, like, we don't know. Like, I thought that would have been illegal too. And like, if people want to do something like that, like, there definitely needs to be more public service announcements, about it, which is what you're all about. You're trying to get the word out there about stuff like this. So I want to help you as much as I can to try to do that. And then towards the end of the video, I'm going to have Bethany share her contact info and kind of tell us a little bit more about alternative death services. So stay tuned for that. But for now, since this is a Dreamwork channel, we're going to dive into the realm of dreams, and then we'll circle back around and talk about this at the end. So I'm curious, since you're an avid dreamer, you've been like a lifelong dreamer, and now you're also a death doula, sorry. Maybe you can let us know, like, in your opinion, how are dreams and death connected? How do you connect those two?
Well, since dreams are soul travel, as you, I'm sure, have talked about in other videos, it's a departure from the physical form, which is basically what death is. The difference with dreams is that you return back to your physical form. So there is still a certain amount of tethering there that, you don't lose. But when death occurs, you completely separate from the physical form. So it's very similar and very close in a lot of ways. And I think if people realized that, they might not be so afraid of death, or they might not be thinking that it's something so mysterious and different, because dreaming, if they remember even a single dream that they've had an experience that is very close to what it's like when you're not in that physical form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, boy, we're going to get into it here in a second on some dreams about death, but I have definitely had those dreams too, where I've had dreams I've actually died and left my body in my dreams. I'm going to be shooting a video about that soon for Hollow Dream season. It's going to be a separate video, but yeah, it feels like practice, and they can be so disorienting sometimes that you wake up from a dream, like of a dream where you actually died, and you're like, am I am I dead? What is, it makes you question reality. What is reality? Do we ever die? Are there just layers and stacks of reality? I go into a lot of rabbit holes like that.
There are too, a lot of dreams that come up when people are nearing death that become much more vivid and meaningful for them. There's a lot of things that start kind of, it's almost like a preparation for transition. So people may start seeing, past loved ones that they hadn't seen for many, many years. They've been dead for a long time, coming to greet them, starting to give them information about what's going to happen to them, things like that, and what they need to know for that transition. And it's really fascinating when you start talking to people around their own death, the kind of dreams that they're having. But it's not always well received either. People think it's a strange question. I had asked a gentleman that I had been dealing with. He wasn't really close to death, but he was kind of nearing that stage. And I asked him what his dreams were like. What was he dreaming about? And he was so fascinated with the question. And when he later told someone else that, I had someone ask me about my dreams, they thought it was a ridiculous question. Why would anyone ask you that? So it's not as well received either, but it's an important piece in the puzzle that we have to open that conversation and that pathway to start better understanding death and to not be afraid or not think that it's separate from our lives, really.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. And especially about those dreams, that our dreams change as you're approaching death. I've heard that before too. I'm sure you're very well versed in that concept. And I know me and Bethany know each other from some of Robert Moss's classes. So I know a little bit about Bethany, and I know that Bethany is very in tune with the other side. And I know that you have some dreams, personal dreams about death that are very creepy and fascinating and spooky and perfect for this episode right here. And I would love it if you would go ahead and share some of those now with us.
I would be happy to. So the dreams that I thought about that would kind of be connected to this particular conversation was a series of dreams I had that were part of this call I referred to earlier. It started with a dream that I had several years back where I was leaving a building that I went to school in, but I had been working in there for whatever reason in this dream. And I had to go down a parking lot quite far from where everyone else that I was working with was stationed. So they were all going to their cars that were parked nearby, but for whatever reason, mine was quite far away. So I had to walk through several smaller lots to get to where I was going. It was very dark. It was late at night. No one else was around. The place was pretty much abandoned apart from us. And as I was walking, I noticed there was a man in a doorway. There was a bit of light behind him, and he was locking the door. And I noticed, just as he was passing out of my sight line, I noticed that there was a hooded person coming up behind him that looked to me to be like a Grim Reaper type, dark robe, can't really see the face, coming up behind him. And I got past him and I thought, I should really say something to him. I should really let him know that, this thing is coming up behind him. So I stepped back so I could see him again. And he was still in the doorway, but the hooded figure was outside now. And I realized he wasn't locking the door. He was unlocking it for this Reaper to come through. And they were coming for me. So immediately, this Reaper was in front of me. And I could see under the hood. And under the hood was a young woman on one side of the face. And on the other side of the face was kind of a skeleton looking, a skull that was almost like the makeup that is used for the Day of the Dead. but it looked very much like a skull. And I was so afraid that I grabbed her shoulders and somehow, I've never done this when I was awake, but somehow I did it in my dream, where I took her shoulders and I threw myself backwards and flipped her over me. I got up and I started running, and she didn't chase after me. I was able to get into this area, and things kind of carried on from there. I was terrified when I woke up. I thought, does this mean I'm going to die? Does this mean I didn't really fully understand it? I uh, couldn't really place what meaning this had for me. So, some years pass, some things keep happening. I keep not disregarding them, but not really understanding them or diving deep enough to understand them. And there was a day that I was going to teach a yoga class, and I was in a really good mood. It was a really hot day. I'm walking down the street. People are passing me, things seem fine. Suddenly I could smell something. And this is while I'm wide awake. This is not part of the dream. I could smell something very strong, and it smelled almost like garbage. So I figured it was coming from this alley that I was just about to pass. But when I looked down the alley, there was nothing in it, no garbage bins. It was perfectly clean. But the smell got stronger, and it started to smell like someone who had potentially been, living on the street for a while or something, because, they hadn't been able to wash. It was very, very strong. And it occurred to me that for me to be able to smell that, and no one ahead of me looked like they might be smelling that way, it occurred to me that this person must be behind me. But for me to be able to smell them, they must have been quite close. And I was getting a little more nervous because I started to hear the voice of a man kind of mumbling. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but it sounded angry. And again, it occurred to me that if I can hear this mumbling, he must be very close, because I could hear it in my ear.
And you're wide awake. This is happening in
this is
daylight
happening
hours.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is crazy.
And so I slowly pulled my phone out of my bag, and I called my sister, and trying to, talk to her and walk a bit faster and kind of get away, because I couldn't figure out what was going on. The only word that I could make out that had been said was the word snake bite. When I finally got to the corner, the smell had dissipated. So I thought, okay, I'm far enough away now. I turned back to see where this person was, and there was nobody behind me. Passing me, they didn't seem to notice somebody. They weren't like turning to look or anything like that. So the rest of the way to my class, I kept thinking, what was going on? What was happening? What was this? And when I arrived, I met another teacher that I was working with on the class. And I said to her, so this is what happened to me on the way here. And she said, what do you think that was? And I said, I think I walked through some energy or something of a person who died, maybe on the street in that spot. And she said, what it sounds like to me. So,
wow.
And I was floored by it. I didn't, understand but I just didn't quite piece it all together. So as I like to say, when I'm not paying enough attention, the universe kind of likes to smack me upside the head.
Yep.
And so the smack that I finally got that woke me up that something was happening here was, again, a waking experience. I'm walking home from work. There was a storm rolling in, so the clouds were starting to move quite fast, and they were really like a deep gray. And I was watching the sky thinking how beautiful it was, even though it was ominous, and I was hoping I wouldn't get caught in the rain. It was late summer, so it was warm. Everybody was in bright colors, and everything seemed to stand out against the gray. So it was very vibrant and bright. And I was in this headspace where I was just enjoying the moment so much, seeing these beautiful, bright colors, people walking by. I was smiling at everybody. I was just in like a really great mood. And I saw someone coming towards me who was all dressed in black. And he stood out because everybody else was in these bright summer colors and he was just black head to toe. And as I'm walking and, looking at the sky and looking at all these people and smiling at people passing me, I started getting an idea of what he looked like as he was nearing. And I could see that he was wearing this kind of, it almost looked like when you take a garbage bag and you cut a hole out of it and put it on to cover yourself from the rain. He had something like that on, but one of his arms had been severed just below the elbow, and it was wrapped in these black bandages. And the other arm was severed above the elbow and also was wrapped. So I could see his arms. And I thought, wow, he must have been in a lot of pain, like to lose both arms. And then as I got a bit closer, I noticed that there was like some charring on his face. And I thought, wow, okay, he must have been in a fire. Maybe that's how he lost his arms. And I thought, I've been in such a great mood. I've been smiling at everybody. I'm going to make a point smiling at him and, not reacting to how physically he obviously looked very different than everybody else that was on the street. And as he got close, I could see the black on his face that almost looked like makeup when I got closer. I could see the whites of his eyes, his teeth, and the little pink around the inside of his lips. And I looked at him and I smiled at him and he gave me this big smile back and he passed and I took a couple steps forward and all these thoughts are swimming around in my head and trying to piece together what I was seeing and how I was deciphering this information and what was coming through. And I realized that he was dead. And it felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I had to step kind of off to the side of the sidewalk to take a breath because I couldn't understand what I had just seen. And I looked back and I tried to see where he was and he was nowhere. And given that he was wearing all black head to toe and everybody else was in bright colors, I figured I would have noticed him. I would see him. I turned around, I couldn't see him anywhere. And I walked the rest of the way home really confused, not kind of feeling that disoriented sensation you get when you've been hit like really hard. And I sent an email to my Reiki instructor and I just told her what happened. I didn't ask her any questions. I just said, this is the experience I just had. And she's been a really great source of support for me. So I sent it to her. She responded quite quickly. And she said, well, psychopomp is a real thing. But, I warn you that once you see, you cannot unsee. So I had no idea what psychopomp was. I looked it up and discovered that it was guiding the dead. And that was what put me on this path to start saying, okay, now it's time to really pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, I need to be working with the dead, the dying, but what is this? And then that started the whole process of me finding out about Death Doula work and jumping into that.
Wow, that's amazing. You mentioned, I have so many things going through my head here, but it's like all of your senses, like your sense of smell, that you are like picking up on the smell of the garbage behind you. That sense of smell, I feel like we all kind of tap into that from time to time, and we might not realize it. For some reason, the sense of smell just seems to like be something that can like pass through the veil very easily. My dog, that's nothing like your creepy stories whatsoever, but my dog often smells like an old woman. Like he smells like musky perfume that like my grandma would wear out of nowhere. I live alone. There's no perfume like that in my house. There's nothing in my house that smells like that. And sometimes he'll just come up to snuggle and I'm like, oh, an old lady with strong perfume has been like loving all over you. Like it's what it smells like. And I like to take that as like a hint, like, oh, well, maybe my grandma was around petting on my dog or whatever. But yeah, you're very in touch with those senses.
Well, I've always, I think for a very long time, I've had a very strong sense of smell, but I just wasn't aware that it was potentially different than other people's experiences of smell. It wasn't until I was in university acting class that, we did this exercise using smell to try and recognize different people in the class. And I was able to differentiate each one of them correctly. And when they started doubling up, discovered, who they were and still knew. So, I kind of had a clue there that maybe there is something that I have a potentially stronger sense of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then later had an experience where I could smell musk, like that 80s white musk perfume that used to be in the drugstore. I could smell that. And I was just closing my drapes and the window wasn't open. It wasn't as though it was blowing in. And I'm thinking, I haven't smelled this in years. Where is this smell coming from? Because I certainly don't have anything that smells like this. And later on, in a workshop, I think it was that same, probably like a week later, a woman noticed a certain animal had been standing near me that had like a type of power animal that had been in the shadows that hadn't made itself known to me yet. But she saw it. She could see that it was there waiting for me. And when I later looked up what that animal was kind of attributed to, they often said that your heightened sense of smell starts to register because it's a type of, it's like clairvoyance, but it's, and I can't think of the word right now. But I thought that was really interesting. So I still haven't quite figured out where that sense of smell comes from or what it's leading to. But I definitely experienced it with what we think is, someone who had passed, and that I was able to smell that they're energetically or something about that experience.
Yeah.
The best that I can come up with so far.
Have you ever had a spirit like that you saw on the street those 2 times approach you and then actually speak with you or tell you what it was that they wanted?
No, not at this point. That was what my Reiki instructor was warning me against, was if I open that door, if I allow myself to see that I can't change that once, I can't shut it down once that happens. So I will have people, spirits, coming up, demanding things, saying things, trying to get attention. And I may not be happy about that. So it's something that I've been cautious about, but with the skills that I've learned through the dream training and the different courses we've done, I think that I'm at a place where I potentially could handle that if that started becoming something that happened while I was awake versus just in dream. I do have it happen in dreams a lot. Different things will come up, but not when I'm awake. Those were the only 2 experiences while I was awake.
Yeah, I mean, that's some strong stuff. I feel like they had to be very strong spirits to be showing up like that strongly while you're awake. That is creep factor for me. I don't know what I would do. I think I would be the one that's like, nope, definitely not going to go there, not opening that up. Join me in my dreams, that's fine, but maybe while I'm awake, maybe not. That's some serious.
Well, that's actually the agreement I had made initially was, I was having, I was seeing people in my dreams and things were happening. And I said, you know what, I can't see it when I'm awake. Fine in dreams, not when I'm awake, not when I'm awake. And I think that was what had limited me for a long time, was used to allow myself, and that I wouldn't see beyond my dreams. And so now I'm a little more open to it. Because as I said, I think through our training and the things that we've experienced, we've learned how to navigate those kinds of things in a very different way. And I think we're awake, the lessons we learn from dreams have impact.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it is nice to know there are people out there and resources out there for people who are getting close to death, their family members, and people who have already passed, to help give them some guidance. I think that's really cool. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about like what are some alternative death services and what are some of the things? So if somebody has a family member that's nearing death, what kinds of things can you offer to comfort them or to kind of help them navigate that process?
Well, it's really important to have conversations and to get some clarity on what the person who is dying really wants. Sometimes there are assumptions made, but we need to understand what's going to be the most comfortable for them and what the preference is. A large majority of people say they want to die in their home, but most people end up dying in hospital. So as a death doula, we try to work out what their care plan is, right? What their preference is. What instances would they be willing to go to the hospital for, and what do they want to stay at home? There's lots of equipment, there's lots of things that can be rented to accommodate someone staying at home. There are hospice, like in-home hospice care that you can receive, personal support workers. So we can talk through a lot of what those options are. If they haven't already been given some information, we can also help take that further. My personal area of interest and focus is on helping support with home funerals. So people who don't want to use a funeral home or don't want to use all the services of a funeral home, you can actually have an alternative space. It doesn't have to be in your own home. It can be in an alternative space, but that you can hold ceremony there, that you can have the remains of someone for up to roughly about 3 days. So people can come by and visit. If they are in the home, it gives a completely different experience of someone's understanding of death and being present with death with, this person. You can wash the remains as well shortly after they pass. So that's an incredibly healing experience for people that we've, for many years now, allowed to occur separate from us, right? In a funeral home, someone else takes care of them. But when we actually take that back and wash the remains ourselves, it can be such a loving and bonding experience, even though the person is no longer in that physical form. So there's a lot of things that we've talked through and what's preferred, what the family wants, and how to get us as close as possible to having that experience for everyone.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's good for people to even just know that that's possible. It might freak a lot of people out, understandably, because it's not something that's mainstream. But there's probably going to be a lot of people that are like, I had no idea. I want to learn more, So where can people go to learn a little bit more about this kind of stuff? Where can people find you?
I have a website called dreamingthetree.ca, and all of my information is posted there. I'm just going through a process of revamping it a little bit. So you may see it a bit under construction, depending on when you're looking at it. But that is my website, and you can reach me there. All my contact information is there. And I also have a lot of reference information as well, just to give you an idea of the kinds of services I have and what kind of support a death doula can offer.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bethany, for coming here and sharing your stories and your dreams about death and how you became who you are and all of this awesome information that many of us really did not know existed. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today.
And thank you so much. It's been so much fun. I really enjoyed it.